Hello, everyone, and welcome to this next session of our Defense One Tech Summit, our 8th annual Tech Summit. My guest for this session, I'm excited to say, is Poland's ambassador to NATO, Tomasz Czatkowski, who tells me I've got that name right.
Absolutely, Mr. Baron. Thank you very much for having me here at your summit. I'm very thrilled to be here with you and looking forward to our conversation.
And thank you as well. Listen, we want to probably just start a little wide in the conversation and get narrow to the defense tech issues of the day. But we are on the cusp of a new NATO summit in Vilnius coming up next month. And there's a lot of talk about what to expect there from NATO, from the Americans, of course, but from all the European countries, things like the next SecGen and Ukraine membership and the continued flow of arms to Ukraine. If you want to start off just kind of broadly and tell us what are Poland's positions and what are your kind of your wish list heading into this summit that's on your mind, and then we'll talk more about Poland itself and its growing defense industry, its growing military capabilities, the changing threats in Europe, and how technology is feeding into all that. So maybe start us off wide about what's your expectations heading into this summit.
Yes, the Vilnius summit will be another important milestone to implement the new adapted architecture of the alliance's deterrence and defense mission, which is the primary mission of the alliance. Basically, since 2014, we've been on the track to readapt the alliance into the conditions of the strategic competition, because previously, since the 90s till 2014, the focus has been on expeditionary operations, on out-of-area operations, basically managing the crisis outside of the area of responsibility. And here we expect to adopt the new family of regional plans, the new force structure. Eventually, we'll be looking into modernizing command and control structure. And here I assume we are more or less on a good track. Then there are some important political issues that are connected to Ukraine, its future place in the alliance. We've given Ukraine promise in 2008 that it will become a member of the alliance. Now it's of course a very difficult time because Ukraine is in midst of the war. I mean, it's defending its sovereignty and territorial integrity against Russian aggression. So it will be difficult to imagine the accession process taking place in midst of the war. But at the same time, we need to deliver on our promise, also because Ukraine has sacrificed so much. Its society has sacrificed so much in order to actually become a member of the Euro-Atlantic family. So we believe we need to show a tangible progress on this issue, and this is one of the most hot topics right now within the alliance. Of course, it will be an occasion for the leaders of NATO, but also for other leaders that will convene in Vilnius to express further support to assist Ukraine in its struggle for as long as it takes.
That's right. On Ukraine ascension, you said that you've called for a credible path forward. You said you want to see progress, but what does that mean as far as a document, an agreement? I was recently at the GlobeSec conference in Bratislava, where this was obviously a hot topic. And there, France's President Macron described it kind of interestingly as something between full NATO membership and the security guarantees the West offers the state of Israel, which is kind of interesting, but that's a broad range. So what does it look like for Poland, either the end result that Poland is hoping for short of full membership, but in a month from now, what do you expect that could actually happen or could be agreed on that represents credible progress forward?
Well, so starting from the guarantees issue or assurances, as some put it, we believe that the best formula for guarantees in Europe is NATO, and there is a clear will on the side of the Ukrainian people and Ukrainian state to join the alliance, and I think they absolutely deserve it. Of course, this is a very difficult, this is a very sensitive situation in midst of the war, but eventually we would like to see Ukraine as a member. So this is the end point for us. There are also questions, how do we operate in the time between? There are discussions on some sort of coalition of the willing based guarantees or assurances that may be issued in the time between, that, for instance, could allow for kind of long-term support that Ukraine could base their struggle, their will to resist Russian aggression on a more sort of long-term commitment of its friends and basically of the free world. This is one aspect. I mean, this is a very sensitive issue, so we of course discussing it now in the alliance. Second issue is like how to reform, how to upgrade our relations with Ukraine, which is now not yet an ally. So then hence this issue of perhaps upgrading the NATO-Ukraine Commission into the status of the NATO-Ukraine Councils. This is something of a unique format that only Russia enjoyed prior to the invasion of Ukraine. Third aspect is the assistance that we are lending to Ukraine, that we are offering to Ukraine. And because of the political decision, NATO is not sort of an operator of the military assistance. There is like a makeshift solution based around the Ramstein group. But then, of course, that wouldn't be able to take place without the protection, without the assurance that NATO is providing to its members. So, I mean, for instance, Poland, we wouldn't be able to take such a risk by basically providing hub for all this military logistical support, but also humanitarian support that we're offering to Ukraine without the NATO protection. So these issues are not really, that you cannot completely separate them.
Right. Well, separate from the technology questions, just reminds me of, could you remind us of what is Poland's position when it comes to Crimea and as an endpoint for the Ukraine conflict? Being Poland's risk for something, with something like that to occur, if Ukraine tries to retake Crimea by force or is helped by the West, Poland is more at risk for any kind of retaliatory measures than the United States is back here, theoretically. So what is Poland's stance on that in the final issue?
We recognize Ukrainian sovereignty within its internationally recognized borders. We never recognized Russian annexation of Crimea, and Ukraine has all the right to take all the defensive measures also down to Crimea. But eventually it will be up to Ukrainians what sort of settlement to accept when the conditions are formed on the ground, because eventually there has to be conditions on the ground. We believe Ukraine needs to be able to dislodge Russian troops from its territory, and if Ukraine recognizes that it's also, that it has to liberate Crimea, will naturally support that.
I bring that up partly because to illustrate to our audience how the risk the farther east that we go toward Ukraine becomes different and greater for each country. And also the calculations, the policies, and the weapons and the technology, getting back to our tech summit theme here. And what Poland has been doing has been remarkable. Every country, it seems, is increasing defense budgets and buying more defense kit, and figuring out ways to make their own, for example, instead of having to rely on outside foreign partners. And so, just some numbers for our audience that I was reading, that, Politico had a recent article in the last year about Poland's expansion, and says Warsaw has said that it will raise its target defense spending from 2.4% of GDP to 5% this year, aiming for 4%. That's a NATO issue, showing growth. And also that Poland already has more tanks, more howitzers than Germany, on course to have a much larger army with a target of 300,000 troops by 2035. That's the defense concept, right? And summarizes it as, no Western country wants to scale up its military so much and so fast. Tell us more about the state of that buildup and the kind of things that Poland is acquiring and the kind of things that Poland wants next. This is your chance to make the ask of what is Poland shopping for and why?
Yeah, indeed. We're taking the security environment and our role within the community of free nations in Europe very seriously. So that means we decided, we have to take our share of the burden, which now is going to be probably the greatest in terms of percentage of the GDP within the entire alliance, at least for some time to be. That means in our security environment, land forces, land capabilities are key. Of course, air domain is also very important, with a rather limited role of naval forces. and a growing role of other dimensions of warfare like cyber and space. Therefore, the commitment, the burden that we are undertaking is focused primarily on land forces, but it will also lead to investment in other areas as well. So as you have mentioned, for instance, we've already signed contracts for modern platforms in numbers that exceed what some of the key allies in Western Europe will have altogether, like Germany, France, UK. Perhaps this will also be kind of a division of labor, because Poland in a way is destined to bear greater responsibility when it comes to the land dimensions of warfare. We basically have to provide the mass, the firepower for any sort of Western coalition in the East, with a linchpin of the Eastern flank, and together with exquisite capabilities that the United States will bring and other allies will bring, will probably, I'm sure we'll be able to deter and defend against any aggression in conventional dimension. And I will not dwell into the nuclear bit, which is a very specific one, but of course NATO is a nuclear alliance and will be for us for as long as it needs to be. So 1,500 modern tanks is a figure for after 2030. The second largest fleet of the Apache attack helicopters, largest self-propelled tube artillery in Europe, and perhaps one of the largest within the alliance, the second after the US when it comes to rocket artillery, that is going to be based on the US produced platforms, but also Korean design platforms together, which will be domesticated in terms of their support, maintenance, production of missiles, and so on. We are of course developing sort of more advanced aspects of this capability, like command and control system, target acquisition systems. We are investing into the ISR, and then there are also companies in Poland that excel in that. So this is indeed a very big chance for the Polish defense industry, for allied in the defense industry, and we are trying to find a good spot between trying to expand our capabilities as soon as possible, and that leads us into very rapid procurement of some of the capabilities off the shelf, either in the US or, for instance, in South Korea, but at the same time trying to build the defense industrial base to produce further systems and to maintain them in the country.
Specifically, what are the capabilities that fall into that category of building a Poland's own defense base, things that Poland might start to make or make more of, so that they don't have to buy them elsewhere?
Well, take for instance the Abrams tank case. That has been the one of those procurement contracts that we had to make in order to very quickly boost our capabilities. But at the same time, this is an opportunity both for us, but also for the U.S. industry and for the U.S. forces, because Poland is very likely to become the maintenance hub for all the Abrams tank, be either the US tanks or other allied tanks in the entire Europe. But even more advanced ideas are developed when it comes to sort of longer term contracts. So at the same time, we're developing this partnership with South Korean industry that has for a long time been looking into placing its building a bridgehead in Europe, and they're quite open for technology transfer, and we're now in the final stage of negotiating a deal on building the entire production chain for their K2 tanks in Poland. The same goes to, for instance, to rocket artillery. I mean, the HIMARS we're discussing. Well, first of all, the HIMARS system will be based on the Polish chassis with the Polish command and control target acquisition system. But we're also talking to Lockheed Martin on establishing a production of missiles in Poland, and same goes to the Korean system.
There's, I didn't mention all the Korean investment that's been, very public, lots written about it. What's your response to the criticism that, Poland is buying, a NATO country is buying from Asia instead of from within Europe at a time when Europe is trying to build up its own base? Is it just the need, the speed that, Europe doesn't have what you need right now and the Koreans do?
Basically, Europe didn't have what we need.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, there's an absolute shortage even for spare parts for systems that we have. I will not name the names of the system, but I mean, it's quite a well-known problem for some of the armor capabilities. Second problem is, I mean, in spite of declarations that there's been I would say, rather limited openness in other EU countries when it comes to joint development of new systems. So, for instance, we have declared that we are, very much interested in joining the project of the next European tank, but there was no willingness on the, among European partners. They basically wanted to develop the tank on their own. So that left us, with seeking for other solutions elsewhere. And of course, we've been also, in talks with the US industry, hence the, Abrams, which is quite a precedent, I would say, in the European market as well. I mean, Poland is the first European ally that is going to operate Abrams tanks. At the same time, we've been offered very interesting conditions in our talks with Korea to basically build the entire production chain of new systems in Poland. So this is very promising. This is very advantageous, and we are now in talks with Korean authorities on that. And I think this actually supports this idea that is being promoted by the United States to build mutual interdependencies, and synergies between Europe and countries of Western Pacific, like South Korea, like Japan, like Australia.
Sure, strategically, it binds, helps binds the regions together. I mean, to bring it back to NATO, is NATO a good place to solve these kinds of issues of joint development, or are these, bilateral means? I mean, this is diplomatic talk more than technical talk. But it's important because, like you're saying, that the future of European security is European production and European agreements. There has to be a way forward, and it sounds almost ridiculous that European countries wouldn't cooperate on something like a tank. Obviously every country needs them, and everyone wants them to work together. So is this a job for NATO to solve first? Well,
NATO cannot solve it like in a kind of decisive manner. NATO can provide a platform. NATO can incentivize. NATO can provide greater awareness on those issues. NATO can provide common standards, and this is something that I would say have been failing for some time recently, and we have to redouble our efforts to have common standards, and then hence have an interoperability, even if we operate different platforms eventually. But when it comes to the implementation, this is the national competence, and for some of the NATO allies, this competence is also shared within the EU, because some of NATO allies have being part of the European Union, they've kind of have shared sovereignty within that construct. So that this is why the EU plays a role as an implementing force, but they also have some of the regulatory powers, and also money, which is very important. I mean, the money that can incentivize joint endeavors. But this is also a very important aspect, I would say, because while promoting those multinational projects within the EU, Poland is very adamant on keeping the doors open for allies that are non-EU members. This is something that we don't always get a consensus on within the EU. But at the same time, I would say it would be fair if this position was eventually met by the same openness from other allies towards European producers.
That's right. It takes everyone to tango, I guess.
Yeah,
so let's go more into the technologies. One of the successes, it seems, in Ukraine has been the use of commercial technology that's been made rapidly available to forces. This is a topic we hear a lot about in Washington, that should America be involved in a direct war itself, it's watching what happened in Ukraine. It's going to have to require a quick access to a large amount of commercial technologies. What are ways do you see that NATO is able to, or NATO members are able to support that, or learning from it? Is Poland learning from it and changing what they acquire and procure from that lesson?
Yeah, of course. I mean, everybody's looking at ways how they can make their procurement cycles more light, more agile when it comes to those kind of dual use technologies.
Right, quicker decisions.
Yeah, quicker decision. But at the same time, so I think you will have a very versatile system. On one hand, you will still need to develop those, very, very advanced, top-notch system that will require, multiple years of development. But you also have to be able to take advantage of what the commercial market is able to provide you with its mass and low cost. So one of the efforts that NATO is undertaking with regard to that is this NATO's technological accelerator, Diana. Diana is basically
defense accelerator. Yeah,
it's basically the concept. I mean, that's been very much needed outside of the US, because the US, startup and ecosystem is mature enough so that you've got enough of funds to and credibility for startups to develop such dual use technology. But it hasn't been the case so far in other NATO countries. So I think this initiative will help very much to grow such an environment elsewhere within NATO.
In another area that we're seeing a lot of use of, obviously, is artificial intelligence. AI is, a front page story right now in the United States for lots of reasons. Kind of, I'm not even sure why, but lately everyone's talking about the ethical dangers of AI, that old question. But really, this is in full practicality, and it's one of those. I guess people call it a capability to have, but others have said it's kind of just calling math a capability. It's a process that's being harnessed. I wanted to ask you about kind of the applications and the needs that you're seeing, because again, to bring up what I was at the GlobSec conference recently and moderated a panel about NATO's Eastern Flank, and asking those panelists, including people like Ben Hodges, the former U.S. Army Europe commander, everyone knows well, what do NATO countries need on the Eastern Flank? It was a surprising mix. At one level, there's a call for artificial intelligence and software that turns older systems into something much better or more capable. But at the low end, there's a call for not only just more munitions, but the explosives inside the munitions. Gunpowder is on the shore. Yeah. Talk about AI and how either through Poland or NATO, what you're seeing work and not work, what's needed, and what you're hoping to draw out from Europeans to move the ball forward on AI.
I mean, undoubtedly, we are seeing massive advancement of the maturity of the AI. Well, we'll see soon more and more of applications of that in the defense dimension. But at the same time, I have to say, I'm more on a conservative in this aspect. I'm more sort of a Clausewitzian approach. So basically, the fog of war will always somehow prevail. The war being one of the most complicated business of the mankind. So my expectation is, of course, the AI will and is already and will assist us in areas like situational awareness, selection of targets, classification of targets, some tactical level planning decisions that will be calculated, more optimally in a quicker manner, maintenance, that will be optimized due to AI algorithms. But at the same time, the upper, the higher you go on this, from tactical up to strategic level, the more of a human involvement in decision making you will have to take, because basically, strategy is still a kind of. I don't believe the AI can replace humans in terms of decisions on a strategic level.
Sure, sure. I think, I think you made a good connection, maybe without realizing it, speaking earlier about acquiring Abrams tanks, for example, and Poland becoming a hub for maintenance. AI is already well known to help, with predictive analysis of determining when things like tanks need maintenance. And are there specific AI areas or areas where, Poland wants to add more AI to it, or is it more,
Yeah. So certainly two areas that we see an ongoing work in Poland is one of them is within the drone technology. We're working in the commercial sector on application of swarm tactics to the use of drones. I mean, either kamikaze drones or reconnaissance drones, or actually those different types of drones communicating and cooperating together. Second aspect is, for instance, application of AI into situational awareness and target acquisition in some of the new weapon systems that we are developing. There's also some R&D on a basic level when it comes to support of decision making, but that is, I would say, less mature than the applications in those two aspects that I've already mentioned.
Are there, on thinking of Poland and its neighbors in the eastern flank, what are the interoperability challenges that you have now? I mean, we've heard for many years things like railway gauge lines and communications, but more than a year now into the Ukraine conflict, what are the priorities that have risen to the top of the list for creating better interoperability?
The gauge issue stays with us, I would say, for a couple of years now. I mean, for instance, we have this difference of gauge between Poland and Baltic states. We expect maybe it will be gone with the new project of Rail Baltica. Other problems are, I would say, sort of offshoots of well-known interoperability problems within the alliance. So for instance, the 155 millimeter commonality of actually lack of commonality. It turns out that even though we have a standard within NATO, there are systems that are designed to use their own unique artillery, and this just cannot be carried on in the future. So I mean, it's looks like a Sisyphean effort. I mean, this standardization. I mean, it's like ongoing. Where communities are working, in terms of the communication standards, data exchange standards, but then new technology comes in, and somehow we end up with the same problem. I would say, I mean, but there is some light in the tunnel. So, for instance, like 10 or 20 years ago, we're all thinking that we have to design like holistic command and control systems with all these applications, from the top. And it's been the work that's led us into some dead end in some areas without naming these specific projects. Right now, thanks to, I would say, more of a flexibility of some systems, we are, for instance, able to federate some of the solutions. So, for instance, federated solutions when it comes to military communications have been like the talk of the day, and allow very able NATO information specialists to connect different systems in order to make them talk together. But there's, I mean, it's still far from satisfactory. We need to redouble our commitment into standardization effort within the alliance.
Ambassador, in our last couple of minutes, talk about your people. Talk about how the war has changed how people think about security issues, about technology. Their willingness perhaps to enter the fields, STEM fields of technology, their willingness to participate and be involved in military and intelligence efforts. Lots of technologists don't want to be involved in that. How has this war changed, at least public opinion in Poland or NATO writ large? That's as our final topic here.
Poland has been a unique case for many years. I think this is due to our history. We've understood that in order to be secure, be safe, we need to take this burden. We need to be prepared. I mean, like this old Latin formula, si vis pacem para bellum. If you want peace, be prepared for war. We understand that very well in Poland. So basically, there is a widespread compromise that we need to spend more on defense, and actually, it's even like whoever promises more spending on defense gets more support, political support in Poland.
Oh, really?
This doesn't work really that way in other European countries, but this
That's
is
right.
the
That's
question.
right.
It's also been the case, I would say, with the overall interest into all that is related to strategy, technology. I would say these issues have been on the rise since, I would say, a dozen of years in Poland. Maybe, you know, like I remember 15 years ago, there was a discussion. I was advising one of the political campaigns in my country, and I suggested some of the defense-related issues, and they said, "Well, I mean, perhaps this is not an issue that will interest voters." Now, I mean, this is one of the most primary aspects for political campaigns. You know, the young people are interested, you know, geopolitics, strategy, technology, and it's been only growing and growing for 10 years or so. So we actually, you know, people are debating, you know, A2AD concepts, you know, role of technology. Yeah, I mean, this is really big in our country. So it's actually
Thank you for
very.
sharing that. I wanted to hear you say it. So for our audience, I can't imagine an American political campaign debating A2AD technologies at that level. But that's the difference between a country that's on the edge of war and one that's on, an ocean away here in the United States. So Ambassador, I thank you for joining us and
thank you very much for having me.
It's been our pleasure.
It's really very interesting discussion. Yeah.
You bet. I think everyone recognizes and appreciates that the Poles are meeting the challenge and doing so in a major way. And we'll all be watching to see what happens in Vilnius coming up. And I'll look for you in the group family photos as well. Ambassador Czetkowski, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you very much for having me.